Hi, guests. And by guests, I mean listeners and the people watching us right now.
I don't know where they came from.
Let's hope they go away. Welcome to our first Fifth Friday, not on a Fifth Friday. April Fool's, sucker.
Oh my god, it will air on April Fool's.
What do you mean will? Totally not recorded ahead of time.
Yeah.
And if it is recorded ahead of time, it was certainly recorded ahead of time with plenty of time. In no way did we procrastinate. It has been a year of Paperback Podcast transformed into Paperback Radio. I wonder if your laugh came out that way. We still haven't quite figured out how not to have terrifying, awful, heartbreaking silences where it looks like this couple is desperately trying to keep the marriage alive. Like, she laughed there. I promise you, she did.
So the first thing we kind of, we want to talk first about why we started this project.
Yeah, no, so I have in my head a very specific answer.
I do not, so you go ahead and answer.
Okay, so...
Why did we start, Lane?
Well, so because you had talked about sort of other things that were peripheral, so I want you to talk about your thing too, but I've had this idea in my head for a while, because, and I mean no offense to anybody who does other podcasts, but everyone who does a talk-based podcast is a monster and should be taken out and hit with a hoe.
Says us as we were doing a talk-based podcast.
That's right.
Woohoo!
I have never claimed not to be a hypocrite. And I'm kidding. I love those podcasts. But I genuinely grew up, despite not being in my mid-80s. I genuinely grew up with, like, copies of the old Suspense. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Suspense. The Shadow. The, even some of the Golden Hour stuff. And I love radio drama. And as I saw the rise of podcasting, the first thing that went through my head was, why are we not, and by we I just meant society in general, returning to an art form that was wonderful, that had performances from some of the greatest actors of all time? Some Vincent Price's best performance, in my opinion, is that I've seen, is a episode of Suspense, where he and some other guy is trapped in a lighthouse and millions of rats are coming for him. He's less in control than he usually is. Orson Welles, famously, radio, and Agnes Moorehead, whom I adore, who doesn't get nearly the credit she deserves, is, because I always thought of her as a slightly cooler Katharine Hepburn, and I know that is not a popular view, but she's the lead in a whole bunch of radio stuff. So there's this tradition that only nerds do when we have this rise of basically a new thing, a new golden age of radio. We just call it podcasting. So there was that. And so my first thoughts when I first thought about this, and this would have been in 2015, but because, very long ago, was full-on radio productions, things written for that in mind. But because of other commitments, and we were doing other things, we just never got around to it.
We got married that year.
We were married the previous year, but yes. 16. If I said 15, Lisa is absolutely right. If I said 16, I am absolutely right.
And we don't know, because this is live.
Get in the comments, folks. I stole that, and I'm okay with it. Brendan Lee Mulligan. Oh. He says, get in the comments, folks. So I've wanted to do this for a very, very long time. I've wanted to create things that were about sound, that were about pacing, that was about atmosphere, that you didn't have to see anything. Mm-hmm. Partially because, and this is the thing I realized from Marco Rowe's play Terminus, check it out, is storytellers can do these amazing visuals that CGI folks could only dream of just by talking and just by making an atmosphere that people can think of it in their mind.
Yeah, there's that great thing that Stephen King says about when you describe something in a book, how everybody's going to picture it differently. Mm-hmm. Like his example is a white rabbit on a table with a red cloth on it. And I picture one of those really elegant small circle tables with fancy legs.
And I picture my uncle in his costume inviting me in again.
And everybody comes up with a different visual. Mm-hmm. So that's the power of just describing something, or just hearing the sound of it or something like that.
So Andrew, you think I've been excited about this for a long time.
Yeah, if I remember, the original podcast you wanted to do was like a villain who was like...
That's right.
A Riddler-esque villain who was basically like, all right, criminal folks, let's talk about what we're all doing and all of our evil crimes that went off this week and who stopped us. And
yeah, no, so because both of us are big fans of Night Vale, and one of the things I found so impressive about...
And the sing-along blog. Dr. Horrible sing-along
blog, right. But the thing we like about Night Vale is not only is it a story podcast, but it has got such a good, variable, central conceit that they've sort of grown beyond now, but it provided them literally with years worth of material, and they still
they still keep the same kind of format, yeah.
And so the idea of a supervillain of a Riddler type, not a mass murderer, but a schemer who's throwing out plots and stuff and telling you about the supervillain community. But these are, of course, taunting messages to the heroes and police. I thought was really funny, and we still might do it. Yeah. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I really like that one. I kind of hope you do revisit that for this. Maybe another one that is 7 episodes long.
Maybe. So, but that's how I've been thinking about. But as is often the case in my life, I didn't do diddly squat until you got involved. So, what made you interested in this?
I don't remember. Remember what made me interested?
I remember a couple of things. But every time I do this, I feel like the audience is going, what kind of gaslit relationship is she in? She can't even say reality enough without her husband telling her.
No, the gaslighting of the relationship aside, I just have a terrible memory for what starts things. And Lane does not. Like, Lane actually remembers conversations we've had. And for me, it's just kind of like, oh, we just decided we were finally going to do the podcast and we started doing it. So, Lane, correct me if I mistake this. I think one of the things that started this is I was working with Dharma Direction, and I was recording my stories for them so that we could put it to a video of watercoloring, and I just realized, oh, it's not that difficult to record this stuff, and we could put it out there on our own as a podcast. Is that right, or just a...
So, two things. One, the lights have not been getting dimmer. That's your imagination. Angela Lansbury totally agrees with me. And two, no, that's exactly what happened.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Because, wow, it's almost like we planned these transitions. I don't think we could do any better than to say, so you wanted a spot where you could put your stories once you realized there was a way to do that.
Yeah, because I had written a ton of short stories. I love doing prompt contests, and I was writing a bunch of short stories just to try to kind of master a shorter medium, because I tend to write extremely long things that are fairly episodic. So I just wanted to practice, doing tinier stories in a more contained way, and having an excuse to display them somewhere kind of really helped me get those out and do them.
Big part, and I think we'll go into this later, but a big part of this for both of us was an excuse to do something.
Yeah.
Because it was a time in our life where we both got full-time jobs.
Yes.
And
it's funny, we started we have full-time jobs. We better start. It's a huge artistic project.
Yeah, but it was necessary.
It was.
Because normally either Lisa or I will sort of take over the primary robbing banks, getting work. So the other one can focus on their artistic stuff. But this was a time we both did. But yeah, let's move that into it, because I want to talk about episode 1, which is great because it's going to tie into your most recent episodes.
Yeah.
And also, and if you could talk about this a little before I ask you some more specific questions, this was always when you started thinking in terms of podcast, this story was like the first thing you thought of. You were like, yes, I can do a long arc with this.
Yeah. So the first episode we did was Paper Future Tellers, which originally was published in a e-zine called Monologuing. But the character in it, Bridger Ducon, the mail carrier, the cosmic mail carrier, lives in a novel that I wrote. But the novel has a third-person omniscient narrator who becomes gradually more and more obsessed with Bridger as the novel goes along. And when we started doing a podcast, I immediately thought the best way to do that character is with something like a podcast or an audiobook, so that you can have her literally interrupting the flow of the narration. You can have her assistant coming in and interrupting the flow of the narration um, in a way that just doesn't exist on the written page. And that's very Night Valiant. It's also very just a weird theatrical thing of a character who's able to influence the story and change how it goes. You know, really, that in the novel works out really well, but really came to life when you adapted it to a podcast.
No, absolutely. Though we didn't see that element in that episode, because that episode was more of a straight.
Yeah.
But there's some fun stuff in it.
I mean, there's some hints in Paper Future Tellers where she does her normal, I'm going to be chatty and opinionated about this thing, but yeah, she doesn't really get that voice until the later works.
The thing I really love about Paper Future Tellers, and why I thought it was, excuse me, for those of you who can't see, I am literally patting us on the back right now. It's very obnoxious, but it's reflexive. What I thought was so bold about it as an opening, right, is it is that story is one of the most genre blending things we have, right? What is the term? We were at a conference and you said this jokingly, and it has become our go-to for this story.
Cozy cosmic horror.
Cozy cosmic horror.
Because one of the conceits behind cosmic horror, it's about a person who delves too deep into forbidden knowledge and loses their mind and goes insane. And one of the central traits about Bridger is he's not looking deeply at anything. This man is not... he does what he's supposed to do, and then he does not care. He does not look behind any doors. He does not delve into hidden knowledges. So to put him in a cosmic situation is funny. In a cosmic horror situation is funny, and nothing bad's going to happen to him. Sort of.
You say that though, but tension is still really there. So, like, one of the things I love about Paper Future Tellers, and for those who are listening to this before they've gone back, please go back. But it involves him going into a retired home for cosmic gods, right? So let's say...
I call it a retirement community for elder gods.
Yeah, so let's say Cthulhu has got full-blown dementia, right? He gets put into this kind of thing. And one of them basically breaks out and, without going into too many details, invokes Bridger's middle school ennui into this dangerous, child-filled, monstrous thing that he basically has to, no other way around it, say, okay, guys, suck it up and deal. And it's actually, I think this term gets thrown around a lot, but genuinely empowering, right? It's not that I have overcome my past, which, though, that's part of it. A big part of it is, that sucked. Let's move on. I've got a job I gotta do.
Yeah, it's really a way of saying, like, listen, this thing happened, and I think it was stupid that it happened then, and I think it would be really stupid of me to be defined by it now. So yeah.
No,
middle school ennui. I love that.
Yeah, I love that story, but it's cool because it's funny, but it's got this cosmic horror, and it ends with this uplifted note, and it is so insanely, radically different from the next story you did, which was Golden Bones.
Yes, Golden Bones.
So tell me, where was that originally?
That was originally for an NYC Midnight contest where the prompt was a ghost story with a lighthouse and lovesick. And you had to take those words, that genre, those prompts, and make it into this full little story. And I ended up with a really kind of cool ghost story.
I wouldn't say kinda. It's one of my, I'm going to say this a lot, faithful listeners, one of my favorites. And one of the reasons is I got to do the main accent. This is the first one, by the way, where we switched writer-reader. Right. So in the first one, you both wrote it and read it.
Yeah,
In the second one, I both wrote it and read it. And this was the first time we switched, where you wrote it, but I read it. And I got to do my main accent, which I love. Yeah. But the other thing about it is you threw those prompts together, but I never knew, am I in the mystic world? Am I in our world that has been haunted? The relationships, the spite, the going out in the water feeling as dangerous as the ghosts. Like, so you had to be thinking atmosphere.
Oh yeah. There was a lot of atmosphere in that story. Mostly because whenever I sit down to write a short story, I always think about, Edgar Allan Poe says, a short story is all in one place with one defined atmosphere. And then I never know if I believe that, but I always sit down and try to do that. And Golden Bones is really built on that atmosphere.
They sort of travel other places, depending on what you mean, but it does. That atmosphere builds. But what I love about Golden Bones, and because it starts off very, very clearly, ghost story. What do you remember the opening line off the top of your head?
He's looking at the sky and he's thinking, I haven't seen the sky in a while, and then a drowned woman shows up and he has this real casual conversation with her, like, oh hey Harry, how you doing? That kind of just weird, like, well, there's a woman here who's decayed in her, like, I think she had like a fish that had eaten part of her cheek, and he's just trying to have a casual conversation with her.
And you don't really get the feeling that she can communicate back, but he has seen this so frequently, and then his the man he's living with, who I always thought the relationship was undefined, even though
Well, I just thought they were friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I just assume all your.
Because I write a lot of gay stuff. He assumed he was gay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe the lighthouse keeper was like in love with him, but the main character, the other guy in that story, who's not the narrator, was so in love with his wife, who was one of the drowned people that he.
Yeah, well, which is one of the things I love. Also, and I know he'll feel typecast, but we need to get Willem Dafoe to play that one. Well, that's
just call him up, Elaine.
Just say, hey, I've got another lighthouse-related weird horror story for you. Why won't you take my calls, Willem? You know we're meant to be together. And
a long pause, if there is one. It was me laughing.
Sure it was. It's not the destruction of everything we care about. Anyway, but what I love about it is, it starts off, and that it's haunting. That talking to the dead person is haunting. The conversation he has with the guy is haunting. And what's great about all of that is that's the atmosphere until suddenly you realize the haunting is also that first step towards opening. Mm-hmm. Right? They save the soul of the wife you mentioned. And they do it through the ghosts. The ghosts help with that. And that part of this haunting, not all of it, there's dead people wandering around and drowning folks, but part of this haunting is self-inflicted, is guilt, is and that metaphor and literal merging together, I thought was really nifty.
Yeah, I always think the best ghost stories are the ones where the person is being haunted by the ghost because they haven't let the ghost go, and this story has a lot of that.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite prompt-based short stories you've ever written. Mm-hmm. Now, the next one is probably the most tragic of your stories. That was, again, if there was silence, that was another laugh.
The next one is Thou Needst a Bigger Cup, and I love this story so much. First of all, it's the introduction of the Cosmic Barista, who is one of my favorite people to pretend to be. This was originally a Dharma direction for I don't remember which one is the water bearer. Is it Aquarius?
Yeah.
I don't know the zodiac. I mean, it's for someone who wrote 24 stories based off the zodiac. I don't know it very well.
I believe that's the ox.
Yeah,
I believe that's the year of the ox.
But whichever one is the water bearer. I said, the water bearer in this world, she's a barista. And it's actually based off of a real life experience that happened to me, where I was sitting in a Starbucks one day and these two lesbians were either meeting up as friends or were on a date, and one of them did not know and asked me, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, but I love this, and I did like a whole like live Facebook thing about it as it was happening, and it turned into one of my favorite stories. So
it's so fun. It's cute. First off, I find the Cosmic Barista, who is not cosmic in this story, but has become the Cosmic Barista.
Yeah. In this story, you don't know that she has any like real powers. She's talking like she does,
Yes, which is great.
Which is just like I love that. Like, I am the change I want to be in this world.
I hate her so much and love her so much. But what makes it really work is her ironic detachment and almost zero genuineness about anything is touched by this really genuinely sweet moment, which she has to try to decontextualize in order to even communicate with it, which is one of my favorite things about it. So I assume that Starbucks person, did you have someone particular in mind when you were writing? Or is that just an
I honestly think it was just that voice. Like, I don't think I've ever actually met anybody who talks like that, but you see it all the time. And I just wanted to play in that voice. I might have been trying on that voice as the narrator for the 413, and realized that she would just overtake the entire story if she had that strong a personality.
No, and I could see that. And then you don't let the other characters in 413 percolate. But what was great about this, and I'd like to talk, is because it'll lead to the next bit. So first one you tell, cozy cosmic horror.
Yes.
Second one, a traditional though fundamentally uplifting ghost story.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Then this one, straight up rom-com.
Yep.
Through the perspective of
of possibly an eldritch entity.
Yeah, well, a narcissist is what I was going to say. And then that leads to Winged Lion and Stone Fish, which is even more traditionally a romantasy.
Yeah, and I think we can actually talk about Winged Lion and Stonefish and Rose Lemongrass Silver Inch in the same breath, because both of them are just these cute little romantasy stories. Winged Lion was, again, Dharma Direction. That one I think was probably Leo. Rose Lemongrass Silver Inch was a different prompt that I think it had to have an herbalist.
Yeah, I love it when it's that specific.
Yeah, no, it's a super specific one, but I don't remember anything else in the prompt except that it had to be an herbalist goes on a business vacation. And I don't remember what else, but yeah, both of them ended up being these cute romantasy stories. Probably about, I know we said about Winged Lion and Stonefish that it's the dumbest smart person.
Two of the dumbest smart people.
Yes.
And also, it's so funny, if that story goes on another 3 paragraphs, it'll get ridiculously spicy.
Yes.
Yeah, which is so funny, right? It's like the beginning, it's the setup premise to like, not like the romantasy, oh, adorable, she kissed me, but the other kind of romantasy, which would make you blush.
The deep erotic stuff that, I would post on other things. But I've never written that scene. But I remember we were playing this once for my mother and my sister, try to get them to, listen to the podcast. And
how'd that go for us?
Oh, not well. But I remember at the end of it, my sister was like, is this gonna happen? Are they gonna do that? We don't want to hear that. I'm like, it's not gonna happen then. It's gonna stop before then, trust me.
But what's great is it's the lead up, right? Because again, what happens in the story, man, I hope you folks have heard these episodes.
If not, go back and listen to them now.
Yeah. But the premise is this wizard, this young, handsome, doesn't know it, dumb wizard, has offered, has had the local...
He's had a local woman kind of move into the house and say, I'm going to be your apprentice now, and I'm going to live here. And he's kind of like, well, I guess you're my apprentice now. And she's there because she's got a crush on him and she wants to bang him. And he does not realize that.
For a year. She's like this. What's great is, and it's because we pick up right where the action starts, which I love with this, but it becomes very clear. She's been dealing with this moron for a year, and he's been dealing with this sweet person who he's kind of fallen for a year.
Mm-hmm. Who also is a bit of a, because She never comes out and says, hey, I'm here because I like you. She's like, I'm going to put myself in this situation and then let him do what men do.
Yeah.
And he's not going to do that because, no.
Yeah, because he's a dork.
He's the dork.
And it's so great, right? Because the dynamics work. They're not caricatures, they're not cliches, but they are deeply stupid and deeply smart, and they destroy themselves. But it all works out because out of politeness. Because at the end of the day, decency in this world means your dreams will come true. And it's funny because in Lemongrass Silver Inch, you have two really smart characters, right, who have a similar journey. Except one of them is fully aware that he likes her is basically like, listen, I'm a smooth-talking, operating Southern lawyer, except in a magical world. I gotta do something so impressive she realizes this.
Yeah, and not a lawyer, but like a PR guy, and Saffron isn't even really sure if Rooster is a PR guy because Rooster is so hyperbolic and so exaggerated, lives so larger than life that Saffron doesn't even know if he's lying about his job or anything. He just is just a con artist through and through. So she assumes that he's not into them. And Rooster's like, I've been telling you for years, I'm flirting with you, I like you, how can I make this clear to you? And eventually Rooster's like, all right, we've just got to, I've just got to give you confidence, and the only way I can give you confidence is by forcing you to get out there and get everything you want. I have to make your dream come true so you know that I love you.
Yeah, which is so funny. And again, this is a massive. I mean, you're absolutely right. Winged Lion, Stonefish, and Lemongrass Silver Inch, but it's this massive tonal shift, which demonstrates the different kinds of things you do, which is one of the fun bits of it. So, and then speaking of tonal shift,
extreme tonal shift,
we go into this not horror, not thriller, but old fashioned. I like to think old fashioned Twilight Zone, old fashioned something like No Exit meditations on what death could be or what meaning is, which is often what we mean when we say what death could be.
Yeah, meditations on the afterlife, and it's these two little stories. Again, both written originally for Dharma Direction. Although this is when it had divorced itself from the Zodiac at this point, and I just got to go do free reign whenever I felt like at this point. And we had But Suppose and Failed at Life. I had always had this idea with Failed at Life of a DMV leading into heaven, just this extreme bureaucracy where you talk to someone who was an avatar for St. Peter, and somebody who had lived her life exactly perfectly, completely by the rules, who just failed. She gets up to the DMV and the guy's like, I can't help you. You don't have your things in order, which is just horrifying to this person and absolutely not, who she was in life at all. So I got a kick out of that one.
No, I love that one because it goes down to the idea of maybe it is necessary to follow rules. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't really make a stance on that, but that following rules in itself is not meaning. Following rules, doing what is expected, is not in itself contentment or joy. And in some ways, it's like going through that. But I'll be honest, I really like that one. But Suppose, which is second person, which is totally, let's put you in an impossible situation, and then I'm going to keep giving you options. And it goes from this exercise, which is think, okay, let's change the function, almost like a depressing metafictional improv game, to another way of going through the action.
Yeah. And I have to say, a lot of But Suppose was inspired by a song called Not Entirely Alone by the Narcissist Cookbook, which just had a brilliant image of these scarecrows, or people dressed like scarecrows wandering on a road, and having angels like vultures swooping around them. And that song is such an interesting meditation on what it is to be with friends and to be in a community, that it immediately put into my head of like, oh, what if you don't realize you're in a community? What if you're just at the and you don't know these are angels, and you think that they're all these different things, and then it's like the narrating voice who's trying to guide you through this weird meditation, challenging your actions and hoping that you're somebody different and pushing you to be somebody different until it reaches this ending where you are different.
You are different. You have found community. You've gone beyond it. It's like the so weird. It's like the choice between heaven, hell, and purgatory is the choices you make, the relationships you do, and not stopping. Because all of the but supposes that end it are, and then you stop.
Yeah. You stop making the choice. You cut off the connection. Because I think some of the initial but supposes are you don't answer the person who's talking to you, or you're not honest about it. And it's always, there's all these moments in your life where you have the opportunity to open up and to make a connection with somebody. And oftentimes we don't because we're doing something else.
Now, I once directed you in a play, and I'm curious, was it in the back of your mind at all in the timing? The idea of this, which, for those of you who don't know, is a short play, and it's about this man and woman they approach, and a bell will ring. Every time the bell rings, the situation will change, because something will have gone wrong. And then the bell rings, and then something has gone right. And then it stops again, and then it builds up, and this, perfect happily ever after develops with just the right kind of prodding one way or another. And you never quite know, which is why I think it's a brilliant play, if it's the same people in each scene, even though it's the same actors, right? And it's the same situation. Or if it's something completely different. Was it in the back of your mind at all?
I don't know if it was in the back of my mind, but I've seen a lot of improv games like that, so it might have been. I think if it had been in my mind, I might have added the ding sound effect in there. Mm-hmm. But while we're talking about sound effects, I want to point out something really cool that Lane did for this episode. Because Meditations on the Afterlife is where we have our weirdest host. It's the triptych.
Yes.
And it's also one where you have a story inside the host's things, because it starts out with this steps, then a gunshot, and then you have the sound of an ambulance. No, it just...
That's right.
You have the gunshot, and then it goes into the story where somebody's... where the triptych is welcoming you, and you're like with death, and you're here in this weird space, and then you hear these two stories, and then at the end, I think we have the triptych speak again.
I don't think
maybe we
so.
just have the sound of the ambulance. Yeah. No, we had the sound of the ambulance leading into it, and then we have the sound of the hospital waking up in the hospital at the end.
Yes.
But it tells this whole story in the host sections, which is...
Yeah, no, I had forgotten I had done that. That one, I will say that one was me. But because it was our first, and is it still only 2 story in one episode? Have we done that since?
No, I think it's only one.
Yeah, but they were so thematically linked, I wanted to at least touch on that with the outro intro. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, I love that one. But again, then we change everything around, and we're at Needle and Knife, arguably my favorite work you've ever written.
Yeah,
and has been for years.
Yeah, I like this story a lot. I was an honorable mention of Writer's Digest for this, and I wrote this one in grad school to impress my mentor, Scott Johnson. His prompt for it was you had to have a monster, because his class was on monsters. You had to have a monster from an unusual monster, a monster from another country, or an obscure myth of a monster, and then you had to turn it into a legitimate horror story. And I think I did that.
Mm-hmm. No, so I've got several fond memories of this one. One is it is the most not like you voice of your voices. It's deep. It's political in some ways. Not in terms of like you're going to get a morality tale out of it, or you can guess what Lisa's views are, but more in the sense of the characters in it are shaped by the country they're from and the place they're at.
And their views on power and what it means to have it.
Exactly. And then just the atmosphere and the monster itself, which involves the mutilation of a baby.
Yes.
This is the only one, and we went back and forth on it, and we found a nice way of doing it. This is the only one we do a warning on.
Yeah, we have the crone basically say, just so you know, this awful thing happens.
And one of my favorite things is, so this was read out loud by an event that Lisa did, where people had stories and they had actors do the stories. And so Lisa had this wonderful actor whose name I don't remember, and she read the story. And this older, and I happen to know, very sweet woman next to me hears the story, turns to her friend and goes, "You know, a man wrote that one." And and I was like, well, actually, would you like to meet my wife? She's the one who wrote it. And they literally didn't believe me until I brought Lisa over.
Yeah, that's a creepy one.
Mm-hmm. And then we move on to Harvesting Lavender, which is your most heartbreaking one.
Yeah, also Writer's Digest contest winner. Harvesting Lavender. That was I think I wrote that during COVID.
I know it was during COVID.
Yes, in fact, yes, it was definitely during COVID. Do we want to go into?
Yeah, I mean, my grandmother died during that, and Lisa watched both my mother and I clear out her house. And it brought up many questions that this is the story that Lisa gets people reaching out to her over.
Yeah, it's an interesting story about complicating relationships you have with your parent at the end of their life, especially when they've been a kind of toxic parent. So it's a weird one, and it's it's essentially it's the witch from Hansel and Gretel and Little Red Riding Hood. If Little Red Riding Hood turned into a witch to defeat her wolf. And the two of them had never gotten along, but they needed each other. And then, the one dies and the other has to confront her ghost, clean her house, remove it.
And it's literal and figurative, which is one of the things I love about what you do is you make the metaphor literal, which strengthens it. You don't live in analogy, right? You give metaphor life. Because analogies are overused and often over-diagnosed. What you do is you take the metaphor and you give it literal power. Like, you're literally fighting the ghost of this person who haunted you.
Yeah, she literally comes out of the mirror and tries to take her over. So it is not just, I'm confronting her and that I'm going through her stuff. It's a literal confrontation.
That's right. And then you made life easier. And then we were at talk about the Reddit post or whatever it was, the Instagram post.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So episode 17 is Coast of Ghosts / Deer Cakes, which is it's two sides of the story. One character is in the other one. But anyway, there's a Tumblr post I saw that was around Christmas time. It was something like, we've reached that time of year when all those city slickers are going to lose the love of their life or their fiancé to a guy wearing flannel when she goes back to her hometown for Christmas.
Yep. And it's just a small premise, but what's brilliant is, so a normal good writer would take that premise and just make a small cute story out of it, right? Which is fun. And you did. So the first part of the Coast of Goats part, is I played the city slicker. I came down. I saw you kissing your boyfriend, your ex-boyfriend, your high school sweetheart under the mistletoe. I'm angry. I go off. I hit my head maybe. And then I start talking to a goat, who I will state for the record is the most fun I've had on this show.
Yeah, I love the goat voice.
And the goat's like, man, you gotta calm down. You don't know what's happening. And she shows up, and it turns out that the family ambushed her, and he kissed her, and she's like, we gotta go. And he's like, no, I know this is important. And that's, I think, another good writer could have done that. But then what you do is take it to the next step, which shows the price. Worth it, but the cost of her following him to Japan.
Yeah. Yeah, because then she's in, I think it's called Nakara Park. I say it right in the episode. Which is just this weird thing that happens in Japan where they just have wild deer in the middle of the city, and they are in this park, and you can buy like shikasembe, which is a rice cake or rice cracker, and the deer will eat it from you because they're basically, these tamed creatures that live in the middle of this Japanese city. And it's this American woman in Japan who, like, I don't have a job anymore. I'm in this foreign country because it's where my fiance is, and I'm supposed to be here planning the wedding, but I just don't. Because I'm all alone here, and I don't, I'm starting to talk to deer. Is what's happening to me.
Yep, and then you did the deer, who then talked like the goat talked to me.
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons why I like your writing style, right? And so someone else would see that Tumblr post and still write a very good story off that fun premise. But what you did was, well, there's actually a reason those stories end that way. So what happens if she does leave, if she does go to the strange? And it doesn't destroy the relationship. It makes it more potent. And again, massive tonal shift, but to this happily ever after.
Mm-hmm.
And then we end where we began.
Yeah.
And we switch to, because up until this point, and let's talk about that for a few minutes and then we'll get into this. You were the person doing the short stories.
Yes. Yep.
One new one every time you had an episode. So talk about tone, how you chose these stories. Mm-hmm. And because during all of this, for most of this, I'm telling one horror story.
Yeah. Seven of the, well, I can say that, for 7 months, because it's one story a month, 7 months, you did this horror story. So it was a lot of, like, I had to, like, show that we weren't always going to be horror, we weren't always going to be scary stuff. So I had to really space out when the horror stories were going to come in, which is probably why there's so many Dharma directions in here, because I'm like, all right, I have to do one of my cute stories now, because Lane got real dark in that last one. And I remember particularly I was worried around Halloween because I wanted to do my ghost story and I wanted to do Harvesting Lavender. And I knew in November, going into, the holiday season is always a tough time for people who have, complicated relationships with their family. I knew that's where I wanted Harvesting Lavender. So we needed to have a lot of lighter things earlier in the season, which is why, we have Thou Needst a Bigger Cup, The Winged Lion, the Rose Lemon Glass Silver Inch, which are just silly, fun, light stories. So to juxtapose the darker tone of Witch Hunters, and then when we start going into the darker, Halloween and the holiday season, it gave us we were also had these other lighter stories, so it didn't overwhelm. And then you switched the tone, because when you went into what to do, I was able to go into some of my weirder stuff, which is why 413 started coming back.
Yeah, and then we went into 413. Mm-hmm. And so talk about because at this point, we're coming up on a year. We're at a year now, as of this conversation.
Yeah.
But at this point, you're coming up on a year. You got some episodes you want to do. Mm-hmm. And 413's been living in your head for a while.
Yep.
So basically, you start from the beginning.
Yes.
So talk about them, because now we're in this. Talk about them as one episode.
Yeah, so it's actually, the whole novel is on submission right now. So if any agents hear this and you like this story, let me know.
We see the four of you in Sweden.
So this is another one I started writing in COVID, actually, when I was working as a city mail carrier, and I was just the worst mail carrier. It was not my calling.
You were good at so many things. That was not one of them.
Yeah. I'm good at so many of my jobs, and this one was just not it. But it was one of those, like, I got a real appreciation for the United States Postal Service. And if you don't understand what they do, next time you walk down the street, look at where all the mailboxes are and think about how many steps a mailman has to walk up every day. Just saying. But Room 413 had been in my head at that time of, like, what is these mailmen that you see in things like Good Omens, where he's delivering packages to death and war and famine and not pestilence but pollution. And you have other stories where you just have these weird things. Night Vale has another cosmic mailman going in there, and I'm like, what is that guy's job like on a daily basis? And I thought, well, let me delve into that with the story. And by the time we came around to doing it on the podcast, I had gotten the voice of the narrator right. I'd written enough of the novel that I'm like, okay, I think I've got her. We can make this into a thing. And it's the first podcast where I really started kind of scripting out the introduction the intrusion of this narrator and how it would look and where it would happen, and how it would change the soundscape of the episode.
Yeah, because we haven't really talked about sound, but we should, because one of my key things when we started this was if we were going to do a podcast, I wanted sound to matter.
Yeah.
And so for the first half year, for the first 6 months, I think for the first 6 months, maybe 7, I was the one doing all of the sound, recording, editing, and then you started learning, and then you took it
in September. I took it over,
and you've just been doing amazing stuff.
Okay.
But it was so important, and for moments like this, for Bridger's story, where the uneasiness needs to go in, we don't necessarily want to do it with a line. It's been tremendously helpful.
And at the times when he's feeling uneasy and no one else is, so you have the great juxtaposition of the soundtrack behind it is really silly, and he's just like, "What is going on right now?" Kind of freaking out, which is fun,
which I love.
Yeah. So those are all of mine. So Witch Hunter.
Yes.
So I just want to talk about my process as the person who planned the season. So I had written down to episode 24, maybe the second, certainly by the time we had the first podcast out, I had planned all the stories I was going to do and where I thought they were going to be. And Lane hadn't finished writing his first story.
Yeah, no. So this is a key difference in not just our general approach to life, this podcast. So Lisa adapted some, but largely took these stories, well chosen, theatrical, single voice, or very tight voice monologue short stories, right? But they'd already been written. They had been written for other material. They had been prompts. I had nothing I thought would fit. So I was like, well, that's fine. I'll start from the beginning. And I planned nothing. I planned not a single thing. I didn't even have a page count that I was trying to hit.
Yeah, we didn't. It ended. Witch Hunters ended on Halloween on accident. Yeah, which is just wild to me.
Yeah, and it's not the only time that's happened. We'll get to it. But what's it to do? Ended in February in time for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, no, it was pretty. It was funny because the first time we needed a single episode, you gave us a perfect game. Yeah. But anyway, so Witch Hunter, the process of it is you're just making this up from month to month. I remember at the time I asked you, so do these guys kill each other? Do they get out of it? And you were just kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, why would I know? Why would I know how this thing ends?
And I just I just looked at him like, I can't with you. I don't know what to do. And then I walked away and left you in the bathtub.
Yeah.
Lane writes in the bathtub.
It's what she tells people. The chains are easier to hide there.
So one of my big questions that I wrote down for this is, when did you know that Emma was going to be a complete psychopath?
So it's so funny you say that, because I would have said, immediately, because in my head, because that first episode ends with her shooting a man in a hospital bed dead, who had done nothing wrong.
No, and had just been freed from a lifetime of being under this witch's spell. So conceivably he's like, I finally get to be my own person. I'm going to recover from this.
But that is ruthless. And you get the idea that that's not her. It's, for lack of a better term, company policy. Emma, so to be clear, there's two characters. There's Mortimer, who is the witch. And all these things go down when he sees a spell go wrong. And he should have just let it go. But what he does instead is he rescues 2 young women from dying. And Emma plays the witch hunter who's sent to investigate and starts tracking everybody down. And you get the feeling that Emma, who appears in episode 2 and murders this poor guy, this is just how the organization works. They're ruthless.
Yeah, and what's fun about Emma in that first episode especially is that she starts out real normal. She's the cheery one in the office, keeping it. She's like, we got cake. I'm good. Sebastian, smile for everybody. You're making people nervous. Just real kind of if I knew how to do a Minnesota accent without it being ridiculous, I would have given her a really friendly Midwest kind of thing. And then she just shoots somebody.
No, and shoot someone, you get this distinct, not empathy from her, because she has none.
But she's really good at performing empathy.
Yeah, and also just understanding other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
She just thinks they're morally reprehensible and must be killed, but she possesses the ability, which makes her very unsettling. But when did she become the
kind of person who flirts with someone overseas by taking pictures of naked bodies in a morgue?
Yeah, so that just happened. She's clearly deranged by the third or so episode. She's clearly deranged when you realize how much she enjoys torture.
It's not that she's become deranged in the course of the story, it's that we're seeing that she's deranged.
Yeah, no, the lack of derangement is discipline on her part. But no, she's tired, she's exhausted, a buddy of hers has been hurt, so she decides she'll talk to someone who makes her feel pretty, but she's not going to put her own self at risk, she's not going to show her own body, but there's this, and this does tie to my thought of institutional dehumanization. There is a morgue full of monsters who happen to look like attractive people, right? Because that's how she views them.
Witches are monsters. Yeah.
And then the guy on the other end responds and does the same thing. So Emma's deep creepiness comes from just me following that institutional dehumanization, and which is always mixed with kind of everyday nonsense, right? Gossip around the water cooler, flirting with someone you shouldn't, taking the moral high ground over stupid minutia, right? All of that. But what she does is find people and murder them. However, it was a conscious choice and an important choice to me that the witches weren't all good and wonderful and healing the earth.
Yeah. The witches are pretty rotten in this too. One of the things I love about your stories, you have such interesting and complex characters. Like, it would have been interesting enough if you had just been like, oh, it's this organization of witch hunters, and one of the primary witch hunters is a woman who's doing this because of moral reasons. But then to make her as twisted and dark as she is, and to make Mortimer as ruthless as he is, but also as empathetic as he is, because he's the guy in the witches' coven who goes out and protects everybody. So he's probably killed more people than most of the people in the coven.
Yeah, no, he is known to be dangerous.
Yeah, but he's also like, I can't let these two young women die. Like, I've got to help them because the legacy of his mother. You know?
Yeah, and in his opinion, they should have known better than to ask. Yeah. Like, one of the great things about Mortimer is, and this is the fun thing about doing something in this style, right? Now, normally, you should be cautious about static characters. But the fun thing about this kind of style, and I wouldn't say they're static, but they're not static because things are revealed. So Mortimer, from his perspective, is like, you ordered me to watch children die? Have you met me? That's not happening. That's on you, moron. Like, what were you thinking? Now, I'm going to help clean up the mess, and if that leaves bodies in my wake, so be it. But no, I watched people murder children when I myself was. Not happening. I also love the hypocritical way he's viewed and treated by the rest of the coven.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
So Mortimer his physicality is based on the guy in Telltale Heart, not the murderer, but the person he kills. So
one giant weepy eye.
He's got this one detached large eye, one small eye. His lip is twisted. He is a series of early 20th centuries, often played by Peter Lorre tropes. In the voice and in the intensity of a dark knight. and all the witches know this about him. They know he's kind of hideous, but a number of them have slept with him. They know he is absolutely ruthless, but they mock him for going after the enemies, right? So they play this double thing with him. And the other element that I wanted to make very clear is, and he would be gotten rid of if he didn't have the support of his patron, who's the head of the coven.
Yeah. If he wasn't so useful to her, he would not. They would have gotten rid of him, which is just an interesting place for him to live.
Mm-hmm.
The last question I had is there ever going to be a sequel?
Probably. I really liked the idea that you came up with, basically a road trip with the two of them. Now, Lisa, I'll warn you, Lisa thinks this is going to be a happy-go-lucky, we discover ourselves, pop daughter. Wow, look, we really can have a found family. It is unlikely to go in that direction.
Yeah, no, because one of the girls that he saves is a genuinely sweet person that survives the story. And, they still got Emma chasing them, so it's just it was a fun idea of road trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the idea of the road trip. It's just not going
No, I know it's not gonna end well. I know how you write. So then we got What to Do, which for anyone who only knew you from Witch Hunters probably felt like it came out of nowhere. Because it's suddenly this light, fluffy, retelling of a fairy tale. So where did it come from?
I have no idea. It came from the voice of the main character. And I mean, literally, I started talking like this, and I wanted to know what he would say. And I knew I wanted it to have to do with balls, ballrooms, that kind of thing. And so I just started yapping.
So you didn't even know it was Cinderella when you started?
No.
Jesus. God.
Yeah, I didn't know it was Cinderella. I didn't know he was Rumpelstiltskin.
Wow.
I only figured out she was the fairy godmother halfway through the monologue. And that's when I realized it was Cinderella. But yeah. So what this is, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a 4-part series about the Cinderella story from the perspective of the fairy godmother and Rumpelstiltskin.
And the fairy godmother who was very absentee.
Because this was my big thing. Okay. This comes from a place of frustration. So poor Cinderella has literally got a nickname because they've had her dig through fire and ash to pick up lentils no one's going to eat. And she's been doing this for decades. She's getting beat every other Sunday because the game isn't on, right? And then finally she's weeping to her mother's tree, and her fairy godmother shows up, and it's like, well, I guess I can give you a dress. And
listen, I have my own life, all right? Just because I'm someone's godmother doesn't mean I have to, what's the good word for this? Parent her.
Yeah. What was this thing? Which is like,
I was grieving, all right?
Yeah, weak ass responsibility. So it had to be a character who could do that. And the beauty part is she's a fairy. Of course she's like that.
Of course she's flighty. Yeah.
But then to combine that with this, it's so funny. The guy, Rumpelstiltskin, is one of the most cynical characters I've ever written.
Yes.
He is entirely about performance. He is entirely about manipulation. And both of these people, which is very different from the fairy godmother. The fairy godmother is much more about passion. She hates artifice, even though she loves to transform. Mm-hmm. And by the way, they have almost nothing to do with why these two fall in love. This is like a parallel story, right? They get them in the same room, but they could have ruined everything if they weren't fighting the wicked stepmother, who is a witch of fairly considerable power. But yeah, so if the answer is Lane, when did you realize it was Cinderella? It was halfway through the first episode. Lane, when did you realize the wicked stepmother was a witch? That was, well, during the magic fight scene as it came up.
Basically, he's in the middle of the second one like, hey, something else needs to happen here. So this woman's a witch.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was like,
Zing, zap, zap.
Yeah, it's even less, because that implies that oh, I have a problem, let me do this. It really was more, and then she came in and threw a fireball. Oh, yeah, she's a witch. And then I went on, right? So...
I mean, it's so funny that you write like that because you end up saying these really interesting things because, as much of an absentee parent as the fairy godmother is, Rumpelstiltskin has been with, what's his face, Prince Jasper?
Yeah, named Jasper.
Prince Jasper, his whole life, as one of the trusted members of the court, is managing the crazy-ass king.
Yeah, that's just, I barely touch on it, but it's clear that the king is a psychopath. Because, again, original fairy tale, this man was like, so you can turn straw into gold, huh? Yeah. Good, you're going to do it or I'm going to murder you. Okay. Rumpelstiltskin shows up, saves the day. I want you to do it again with more straw. Okay, fine. Rumpelstiltskin saves the day. Okay, you're going to do it a third time. Fine. All right, I guess we're getting married. This does not strike me as a guy who I think would be healthy.
Yeah, a good king. Yeah, no, so that kind of leads me to one of my other questions is, did this end up darker than you intended?
No, I think this is quite light. It's fun. Right, so...
I just remember, like, the stepmother at one point in time is, like, falls into hell, I think, at the end of that, like...
No, yeah, no, she's in a firefight.
I just, because the fairy tale was very dark. I didn't
know... Yeah, no, that's, it wasn't particularly dark to me, but, and we may go into this as a kind of thing I do, when I play in a world, I play in a world, right? So, in the story, she cuts off the heel of her own daughter. Why?
Blood sacrifice. Yep.
The only thing is I had Rumpelstiltskin survive.
Yep.
That was my thing, is if he had... When he stamped his thing, he went down, but didn't leave. That's
just kept hanging around the castle like, hey, you might need more straw turned into gold. You don't know what your husband's going to do.
I also love that there's like 3 magic users. He's the worst of them.
Yes.
But he is
the most active.
He is the most active. And it's like fairy tale magic. He can shrink himself to the size of a flea. Mm-hmm. He can throw his voice. He can make buttons pop. Right?
And then you have a fairy godmother who's like, I can make myself 12 feet tall and sparkle in whatever shape I want. Yeah.
Yep. But she's so not human, right? So again, one of my favorite moments is when I realized, so you first meet the Wicked Step Sisters, who in many adaptations, I don't remember how they're described in the original story, but in many adaptations, they're ugly. They're even called the Wicked Ugly.
The ugly stepsisters.
And I was like, no, they're stunning. Partially because for stakes, doesn't mean as much if they're ugly, right? It doesn't mean as much if they're not appealing. So no, they come in and the first one has kind of got this I'm in charge sensuality, and the other one is this I'm a hip rebel. And then the stepmother comes in and it's gothic, beautiful queen. And in Rumpelstiltskin's head is, oh my gosh, this Cinderella must be stunning. Because the fairy godmother has been calling them ugly. She's been calling them hideous the entire time. And he's like, I wonder how beautiful this Cinderella is. And babe, because you like it so much, go ahead and say what she looks like when she walks in.
God, she looks like, so first of all, she's wearing a mask that only shows, like, it's a weird mask. It only shows that her eyes and her mouth. So the opposite of what most masks would, it's a weird block mask. Her face, her hair is literally turned into nests by birds. Like, birds styled it, and it's exactly what a bird would find fashionable. The features that the fairy godmother chose to highlight are, like, her breasts, her hips, her legs, and she just chose to highlight all of them, which means that there's, like, nothing on this dress.
Yeah.
Like, she would have had her go naked if she could, like, because she's just nuts. And it's like this really bizarre image of Cinderella that is absolutely perfect in the fairy's eyes. She's like, yes, this is the most fashionable, wonderful thing I've ever created. I'm a goddamn fashionista genius. And everyone else is just like, what?
Yeah, I mean, literally, the guards are going to throw out this woman.
Yeah.
And so they have to create a distraction, which is the giant.
Yeah, the giant dancing troll.
Yeah.
God, I love that story. It's such a weird one.
And then again, Cinderella and the prince meet up, fall in love. And our people have so little to do with it because they're just dealing with the chaos they themselves have created.
Yep.
And then, in a small homage to Stephen Sondheim, I have the prince be a former Ray, though I make his transformation genuine.
Yeah. I really like that part of it when he's like, and I think it's in the third one, maybe it's the fourth one.
It's the last one.
Yeah, where he goes out on this thing and he's like, oh, we're going to follow these shoes. I know what we're going to do. We're going to go to this one, and they're like the biggest sluts in the kingdom. And he gets there and he's like, I miss her. Let's not have sex with these guys anymore. We're going. And it's like a really interesting, touching moment in a strange kind of way.
So, but then, so up until it was a thriller horror, right? Because it was some parts espionage thriller, some parts horror, and then it was we called it a romantasy. It doesn't quite fit that mold. It's kind of an absurdist Oscar Wildean servant's play.
A little more farcical, I think, than where I thought we were going at the beginning.
That's true, because again, we had no idea where it was going.
Yeah. I mean, based on the opening monologue, which is, he's hyper fixated on what is a ball, what is a masquerade, and what is a country dance. And, then he's working with the fairy godmother to arrange this marriage. I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be like they're matchmaking, but it's like faintly, Regency? I don't even know.
I certainly didn't.
No, and then by the time it was finished, I'm like, all right, well, this is a totally different genre than what I thought it was. I would have advertised it a little differently.
But I think it would still fit with the romantasy crowd.
Yeah, I know. So it's got enough romantasy in it that it's still romantasy. But I mean, there are definitely strange elements in there. Like farce is definitely one of them.
Yeah, I do think it's sort of a romantasy farce.
Yes.
Where the leads aren't the ones getting together.
Yes.
Though with definite chemistry. Like, you definitely get the idea that Rumpelstiltskin and the fairy godmother will probably make out behind the barnyard when they're done.
Yep. No, I love. If Rumpelstiltskin can stand her anymore, because she has caused so many problems for them.
But remember, Rumpelstiltskin, despite being the steward, thinks because this is where he's my most Oscar Wildean character. He finds it all ridiculous.
Yes.
Right? So he's not opposed to the fairy godmother on principle. He's opposed to her in practice, right? Because, listen, I've got this psychotic king, this completely ungrateful woman, and this child, whom I love, I've raised from infancy, but let's be honest, kind of a dick, and yes, I can see why you love this Cinderella woman. She's charming. Please don't have her come in dressed like a cyborg Dalek just ran into a tea shop, right? It's not, which is why he vibes so well with her.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I love them so much. Yeah.
And then my first short story on the thing.
Yes, A Perfect Game, which is just this really interesting, subtle, frightening piece. I described him, I think, at one point in time as a failed artist who's taking out his aggression on his father's old mistress.
Yeah, it's basically.
I mean, it's like it's also like a revenge tale against his own. Like, I think the way you had said it is, if his father wasn't dead, he would have killed him.
Yes.
And it's just
if he had the courage, which I'm not entirely sure.
He probably, we don't know. So tell me the process of that one, like.
Right. So I'm a serial killer, and occasionally that bleeds into my work.
Oh, we got a lot of serial killer vibes. Yeah.
No, so you don't know where that one came from. Like, genuinely, I don't know where it came from.
I remember when we were bowling, you asked if it was possible to do a perfect game, and we looked up. It was 1 out of 500.
Yeah. No, but how often?
How often? And I remember both of us, because neither of us are particularly athletic. We were just kind of like, well, it's not just a mechanical thing. Once you kind of figure it out, you should just be able to do it. And it's rare. It's hard. It's hard to.
It's 1 out of 500. This is literally the opening lines. It's about 1 out of 500 on the professional level. And so those are people who do bowling, do league bowling. It's about one out of 500.
Yeah, which means it would only happen like once every 2 years if you bowl once no, even more than that. If you bowled every night, it would be once every 2 years.
Yeah, once about every year and a half. Yeah. And I found out that that's not actually the legendary thing in bowling. The legendary thing is 3 perfect games in a row.
Oh,
right. That's kind of, but that seemed too specific. I thought the perfect game was a better way.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So that one was, I knew he was going to kill this woman, and spoiler alert, and I knew he was going to do it only when he had bowled a perfect game, because then he would have earned it. Then he should get what he wants. And my initial thought was going to be that he bowls the perfect game, feels like he's earned something, hits on someone, she refuses, so he kills her out of anger. That had been my first thought. But then as I started writing and I realized just how twisted this guy was, it's not that. Because she's ready, because she doesn't know.
No. She would have banged him the first time he talked to her.
Yeah, or soon after, right? It's and remember, we only have his perspective, but
that's right.
But she was ready to engage in physical intimacy much earlier. It's not a her denying him thing, but it's this obsession he developed with his father, which is, I have to be better than him, or at least as good. So I have to bowl this perfect game, then take her. And you think take her means have sex, but it's murder her. And it's kill her, so that way he can avenge his mother.
His mother, yeah. And then you have that really frightening moment at the end of it where he's like, but I'm going to keep bowling, and what do I do the next time? I get the perfect game.
He gets the thrill. Because he gets the thrill as he's wrapping up the body. But yeah, no, so that one, I doubt that one will have more. That seems like a perfectly fine short story.
Yeah, I think it's very nice and very contained.
A good man is hard to find. You don't need to go further. But yeah, no, I was happy with that one.
Yeah.
So the reason why we're having this retrospective, is that we've got some kind of exciting news, which is Lisa did a whole bunch of hard work.
The exciting thing is we have a YouTube channel, and all the stuff is going to be going up, not just on Podbean, which delivers to like Spotify, Apple Radio, all those places, and not just on our Substack, but onto YouTube, which I think will make it basically easier to share with people.
I agree, especially folks of a particular generation. And I do
like my mom.
Yeah,
we're talking about my mom.
And mine, and my mentor. But also, all you millennials who think you're not old, but feel your joints creaking, you know you belong there. You know that sometimes your little cousin sends you a link, and you're like, how does this work? Why don't they just send me an Instagram or a YouTube? And that's when you realize it's happening.
We're on YouTube now.
All right, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like these Fifth Fridays, let us know. If you like our normal stories, let us know. Comment. One of you comments, and we appreciate you. You know who you are. I don't mean to sound desperate, but I don't have any other affection in my life. Lisa is me. I do 2 voices.
Yeah. There's at least 300 people out there. One of them has to have something to say to us.
One of them.
Maybe 2.
You can even call me ugly. I kind of like that. Just saying.
Anyway, I'm cutting it there. Hiya, I'm LJ.
And I'm Lane McLeod Jackson.
You're a troll.
What? I thought it was funny.
We're here to let you know you can also find us on Substack under
Paperback Productions.
Yep, this podcast and other goodies will be delivered right to your inbox if you subscribe.
So please support us.
Emotionally.
Financially.
Dramatically. See, I can be funny too.
Try to be professional, okay, babe? Thank you all for your support.